Hello YouTube, my name is Andrew Tapua and I am currently a pursuing student at Western Governors University and I'm in the software development program. And to help fulfill the needs, to help fulfill the requirements of my scripting and programming applications class, I will be creating a MERN Full Stack YouTube tutorial series to show proficiency and to showcase my skills and my knowledge and basic understanding of the concepts of programming, as well as the being able to show the ability of creating a full stack application. I hope that if you are watching this and maybe you have been wanting to get into code, I meet a lot of people that always tell me that they've always thought about or wanted to try out coding. If that's you, then take this as the sign from the universe that you should definitely do that. And I think you'd be very surprised at what sitting down in front of a computer and really diving in can do for you. Yeah, I never thought that I would ever be doing this, or kind of even have the skill set to do this kind of thing. But I think if it's something that you're really interested in, and if that's something that you really want to do, then I say just do it. Just jump into it like you've been doing it your whole life, and you'd be surprised at how much you can overcome. All right, enough talking for me. We're gonna do this nice and quick, get into the video. Thank you for watching. If you can, please like and subscribe or leave a comment. And if you are a coder, please feel free to give me tips as well as recommendations on what I could do to make my code look better, look nicer. Just any tips, that'd be so helpful, because I'm just a beginner. I'm just a baby in the world of coding. So any help would be awesome and would be amazing. So I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, hello there YouTube. I'm Andrew, and today we will be making a MERN Full Stack application, and it's going to be fully functioning as well. We'll create a REST API, and that will allow us to create, read, update, and delete items from the server. So it'll have full CRUD functionality: create, read, update, and delete. So we'll be creating a journal application. So we'll be able to create journal entries, read all the journal entries that we've created, update specific journals, and then delete specific journals that we want to delete. And so let's go ahead and begin, because I kind of want to do this kind of quick, but I also want to be as thorough as possible. Okay, so let's go ahead and open our command prompt here. Okay, so once we're in our command prompt, we're going to want to go to the location of where we're going to want to create this application. So for me, it's going to be CD desktop, coding, and then I'm going to be coding practice, and then preface, and then see. Okay, so I'm going to make a directory here, and I'm going to call it journal app, and then we'll change into that folder, journal-app. Okay, now that we're in here, we'll just say code dot, and that'll open up VS Code for us. Okay, looks like I've got a few instances of VS Code already running. Another project I was working on. Okay, let's go here, let's delete this here. No, get out of here. Okay, the computer's kind of slow. Okay, let's go ahead, and you'll see that now when we open a VS Code, we have a folder here called Journal App, and this is going to be the root of our application. So everything that has to do with our application will be stored in this folder. So what we're going to want to do first here, let's go ahead and create a new folder, and we'll call this backend. And inside our backend folder, we're going to create a new file. I'm going to call that server.js. And then let's just put something here. Okay. Should save that. All right. Now let's go ahead and open up the built-in terminal, or you can use command prompt. That's whatever you prefer. I'm going to use the built-in terminal. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to install npm. And npm is Node Package Manager. It's just going to allow us to use specific packages and dependencies to create a project. Okay. So after we do npm install, it was already installed for me. So, but you might have to do it. Let's go ahead and say npm init. And when we do that, it's going to create, okay, package name, version description, say MERN. Journal. Okay, entry point, we're going to say server.js because we're going to be using that server file to as an entry point for our application. Don't need something there. We'll add a Git repository later. Author, PUA, license. I'm gonna leave that blank. I don't have no license as of now, but I am in school, and that's definitely a goal. And I'm more than sure that's gonna happen. It's okay. Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this. Okay, so now you can see that it's created us a package.json file here. And this is just going to house all of the dependencies and packages that we'll install to help create our application. And it's also going to house like metadata. So it's going to have the name, the description, the author, anything like that. Okay. So now that we got that, let's go ahead and install a few of our dependencies that we're going to use to create this. So I guess I should go over what MERN stands for. So MERN is a 3-tier full stack architecture. So M stands for MongoDB, and that's the database that will connect to our application. And then E stands for Express, which is the backend framework that will allow us to create all the servers. It'll allow us to create our routes, our controllers, anything that has to do with the backend. That's what Express is used for. Then React is the front end framework. That is anything that the UI or the user sees, or yeah, anything that the user will experience in regards to that. And then we have Node.js, which is a server side language, which will allow JavaScript code to be ran outside of the browser. Okay, so let's go ahead and install our packages and dependencies. I'm going to say npm I is for install, so you can type out install if you want, or you can just abbreviate with I. npm install, we're going to want express mongoose .env. .env is going to allow us to have environment variables, so we'll be able to use variables all across the board. We use colors, which is going to allow us to add colors and underline our text, pretty much just for aesthetics. And then what else are we going to do? Mongoose.env, colors, and I think that's it so far. Express mongoose.env colors, yes. And so while that's installing, in the root of our folder, we're going to create a file, and we're going to call this .gitignore. So when we create our Git repository, we want Git to ignore these, so we're going to want it to ignore node modules, and then we're going to want it to ignore .env. So we'll save that, close out of that, and we're going to want to create another file in the root of the application, and we're going to call this .env. And since we have our .env dependency installed, we're going to be able to create some variables. And I'm just going to say node environment is equal to development, because we are currently in the stage of developing our application. And then we're going to set a port number for when we connect to the server. And so we'll just use port 6000. We're going to say port 6000. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And then here, after we've installed some of our packages and dependencies, I'm also going to want to say npm install -d nodemon. Now, the -d is going to allow us to install nodemon as a dev dependency, because it's not used really in the development. It's not needed for the development of the application. but NodeMon is going to watch our server. So it'll automatically update our server every time there's a change, or every time we save it. So let's go ahead and clear that. Now, if we say, look at our package.json actually, you can see our dependencies are here, and then NodeMon is listed as a dev dependencies, but it also has colors, .env, express, mongoose listed as our dependencies down here. You're also going to see the scripts here, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a new script, and we're going to call this start. This is going to allow us to start the server. I'm going to erase this, and here we're going to say node, and we're going to just reference the path of our entry point, which was server.js. Then under this, we're going to have to create, we're going to call this a dev script. And what the dev script is going to do, it's going to allow NodeMon to watch our application constantly. Because so the top script start, that'll just start our server, and every time there's a change, we'll have to restart our server, which is kind of a hassle. But NodeMon will constantly watch it. So we're going to say NodeMon backend / server.js. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And then if we go to our terminal here and we say npm run dev, we should get hello world. Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and control C out of this. And then I'm going to clear this. And then I'm going to create a Git repository. Oh. Git commit, git add all, git commit, initial commit. Awesome. So let's go ahead and start setting up our server. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to bring in our dependencies. So we're going to want to say const express is equal to require. Here we're going to say express, and that'll that'll bring in our dependencies so that we'll be able to use them in our application. We're also going to want our .env, so we're going to say require .env, because so we can use our environment variables. But we're going to want to configure this, so we're going to say .config. So now, since we've configured .env here in our server file, we'll be able to use those environment variables anywhere in our application. Okay, so after we got that, let's create a const for a port. We'll say const port is equal to, and in order to use variables from our .env, we have to say process.env dot, and then we will add the name of that variable, which is ports. And so now what our application is going to do is it's going to assign whatever value we have for port in our .env to the port here in our server file. But we can add these, and we can say or 5000. So this is saying our const port is equal to the port that we've created in our .env file, but if for some reason there's something wrong with that, we will use port 5000. Okay, awesome. Once we got that, we're going to want to listen for ports, and so if we say app dot, oops, why did it do that? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. We need to initialize our Express app. To do that, we just, here, let me put a comment here, initialize. Okay, we're going to say const app is equal to express. We're going to call express as a function, and we're just going to assign that to the variable app. Okay, const app is equal to express. Now we can listen for the port. And in here, we're going to say app.listen. And in here, we're going to pass our port variable. Then we're going to create an arrow function that's going to fire off. And we're going to console.log. We're going to print to the screen. We're going to use backticks. Server started on ports, and then in here I'm going to pass our port variable. Okay, let's save that, and if we run dev, we should get server started on port 6000. Awesome. Okay, another thing that we can do to make this look a little bit more aesthetic is we can bring in our colors dependency that I was telling you about earlier. So if we say const colors is equal to require colors, and if we go behind this backtick here and we say dots blue, and then we can say dots underline, and we save that, you will see that it now says server started on port 6000 and the font is blue as well as being underlined, but I just prefer it white, so we'll just save it as it is. Okay, so now that we got our port running, I say the first thing that we can do is create our first endpoint, and I say we're going to create a get request, and that'll allow us to get all the items from the server, from the database. And so what we're going to want to do is, after we've initialized our app, say create endpoint, and under here we can say app.get, because we're going to be doing a get request. We're going to be pulling items, we're going to be getting items from the database. We're going to say app.get, and then here we're going to have to pass the endpoint that we would like to use. So for our API, we're going to use /API/journal, because we are creating a journal entry, a journal application, I'm sorry. And so this get request, when we do it from the browser, when we initiate this get request, it's going to get all the journal entries that exist from the database. So our endpoint is going to be API/journal, and after this we're going to want to create an arrow function, and we're going to want a request response here. We're going to want to pass. Here we go. Oops, sorry. We're going to say request response. Oops, okay, that wasn't very beautiful. I'm just going to restart that. We're going to say app.get, and in here we are going to pass our endpoint that we were going to use, and that is going to be API/journal. So when you use this endpoint in the browser, it is going to get all the journal entries that exist from the database. Okay, so after we got that, we referenced our endpoints. We're going to create a request here, response, and that's going to fire off. And we're going to pass in an object here, and we're going to say we're going to get a response JSON. Let's pass it 200, and then we can say response.status 200.json. And in here, we're going to pass an object. We're going to say message, and in here, we're going to say get all journal entries. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And I think that should be working. Okay, so now let's go ahead and open. And oops, sorry. If you go to Postman here, let's see. We're going to create a GET request. And Postman is just an HTTP client, and when there's no front end yet, it allows us to kind of interact with some kind of front end with what we have of a back end. So we're going to create a GET request here, and we're going to enter our URL here. We're going to say HTTP localhost : we're going to port 6000, and then we're going to pass the endpoint, which is API/journal. I cannot spell today. And if we send, we should get a message down here in the body that says message get all journal entries. Okay, awesome. So when you enter this endpoint into the browser, it's going to come up with a message, get all journal entries, which will allow a user to see all the journal entries that we've created. So now that we are able to get items from the database, we're going to want to create routes to allow us to add items to the database, as well as update items and delete journal entries. And so in order to do that, we'll have to create different routes for that. So we're going to go into our VS Code here. I'm sorry, let's make this bigger. And we are going to actually create a folder to house all our routes because we don't want to, kind of crowd our server file. So we just to be, for the sake of being organized, we'll just create our own routes folder. So in our backend folder, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it routes. And in our routes folder, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it journal routes.js. Okay, awesome. And then here we're going to want to bring in express is equal to required express, and then we're also going to bring in our router. So we're going to say const router is equal to express dot router with a capital R. Okay, so let's create our first GET request. And so we're going to say routes dot get, and here we can pass. And here, yeah, actually we're just going to route them. So we're going to say router dot route, and in here we're going to say this. We're going to pass. We're going to say dot get, and we're going to say get journal dot post, because this is going to allow us to create items, create journal entries. And we're going to say create entry, and so we're just passing variables into here as parameters, because we're going to create these variables, get journal and create entry. We're going to create those variables here in a sec. Okay, after we got that, we're going to say router.route, and here we're going to use the endpoint API/journals, but we're also going to need specific ID from that. And in here we're going to say .put, because that's going to allow us to update a specific item, update entry. And then we're going to say .delete, and this is going to be delete entry, because this is going to allow us to delete entries. Okay, and after this, we're just going to want to export our router. Let's say module.exports is equal to router. Then we're also going to want to bring in those 4 variables that we created: get journal, create entry, update entry, delete entry. So we're going to bring them in, and they don't even exist yet, but we're going to create them. I'm just kind of working backwards to be a little faster for the sake of being quick, I guess. Probably not a very good habit to be in, but it is what it is. So we're going to say create entry, update entry. We're just passing these variables in a list, in an object. Update entry, delete entry. Okay. And here is we're going to require, and we're just going to reference the path of where these variables are coming from, which is going to be our controllers /journal controller. I'm sorry, I cannot spell today. Okay, and when we save this, it's going to give us it's not going to give us an area. Okay, so now we're going to create those variables that we just created in our routes, and we're going to go and create a new folder, and we're going to call this controllers, and in our controller folder we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it journal controller.js. And in our controller, we're just going to want to create those variables that we referenced in our journal route folder. Journal routes file, sorry. We're going to say const get journal is equal to, and in here we're going to do a request response, arrow function that fires off just the status 200, and we're going to get back a JSON, pass an object. We're going to say message, we're going to say gets all journal entries. Okay, but we're going to need 4, we're going to need 3 more of these. Okay, let's go ahead and export these now. Is equal to, and we're just going to pass our variables in a object here. Say get journal, create entry, update entry, delete entry. Okay, in here we're going to want to say const, I'm going to call this create entry. And instead of get all journal entries, we're going to want to say create new entry. And down here, we're just going to want to say update entry. And this is going to allow, this function here is going to allow us to, update a specific entry. But we're going to want to put backticks because we're going to want to request parameters, request params ID, which means that we'll need to add a specific ID number to that journal in order to update it, because we don't want to update all the journal entries. We want to know which specific journal entry needs to be updated. So we're going to say update journal entry. In here, I'm just going to pass request.params.id. Okay. And then it is the same thing for our delete entry variable, because we want to know which specific journal entry needs to be deleted. Okay, and so in here we're going to backticks, and we're going to say delete journal entry, and then we're going to pass request.params.id. Okay, awesome. Then go ahead and save this here. All our routes should be good here. But before we go back to Postman and try to run our routes, what we're going to need to do is go into our server file. We're going to need to get rid of this because we're not going to be putting our routes in our server. But we're actually going to say app.use, and we're going to be telling our application which route to use when we are executing our routes. So we're going in here, we're going to say /API/journal, because that is the route that we want to use, the endpoint that we want to use, I'm sorry. And in here, we're just going to want to reference the path of where our routes are, which is in our controllers, no, it's in our routes file. Journal routes. Awesome. Now, if we save that, we got an error here. Cannot find controllers. Journal controller. Okay, here, hang on here. Did I misspell our controllers? Journal controller.
What does this even mean, right? Like, no one took it seriously, and then very quickly you had the Cheka and secret police and all these other kind of implementations of the communist state, and people are like, oh.
Okay, let's see why this is not working here. Module not found. Oh, I think I referenced the file wrong. Oops, here we go. There we go. Now if we save this, this should run. I believe so. No. Node-mon crashed. Okay, hang on here.
Predictable. The Great Depression, in retrospect, there were certain things that were predictable, but it was not at all the case that it needed to last as long as it did in the States as FDR made it do. So there's all sorts of things. I mean, if they...
Oops, I'm sorry. We need to go out of that twice. There we go. Now if we save that, it will run just fine. There we go. Server started on port 6000. Oh, the joys of coding. Just one little period. Just one little anything, anywhere, and that can ruin your whole application or cause you to have an error. Okay, so we're back on track here. I was kind of nervous that I was going to have to stop this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to Postman. And now if we go ahead and click on our GET request here, it should say get all journal entries. Awesome. Now if we go to our post request and we send the request, it will say create new entry. So this endpoint is going to allow us to create new entries. And if we go to put and try to send that, it's going to give us an error. So, and this is the endpoint where we want to update a specific journal entry, but it's giving us an error because we need to reference the specific parameter ID, which is, let's say, journal entry 45. And we were to send that, it will give us back update journal entry 45, and this endpoint here would specifically allow us to update journal entry 45. Okay, now if we go to delete request, and we go ahead and send that, it's going to say delete journal entry 45. So this endpoint will take us, this route will take us to the end, this route will allow us to delete specific journal entries from the database. Okay, so we completely have our route set up, and one thing that we can do now is, if we really wanted to, we could start creating the functionalities to our routes. So one thing that I'm going to want to do here is, let's go ahead and import Express Async Handler. And what Express Async Handler is going to do, it's going to handle our async, because we're going to be creating async functions, and it's going to handle those so we don't have to do a try catch in our function. We can just call the Express Async Handler, and it'll take care of it there for us. Okay, so here we're going to say npm install, and we're going to say express dash async handler. Okay, so while that is coming in here, let's go ahead and bring in our express. Oops, sorry, we're just going to create this as sync handler, call a new variable, and here we're going to call express sync handler. There we go. But before we do this, we're actually going to connect our MongoDB. Yeah, we're going to connect MongoDB to our application, which is our database, and then we'll be able to create a model, and then we will really be able to finish our functioning routes. Okay, so let's go ahead and close out of this. What we're going to want to do is, let's go ahead and create a new folder here. We're going to want to call this config, and in our config folder, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it db.js. And here, we're going to create a function to connect our database to our application. But first of all, what we're going to want to do is, let's go ahead and go to MongoDB. And this is where our database, and in order to connect MongoDB to our application, we're going to need a URI, which is a string, a link that will take us, that will allow us to connect. Sorry. So let's go ahead and click connect your application. Once you've created a database, it's pretty easy. You can create one for free, super quick. Once you set that up, you're just going to want to, it'll show you your database. You just go ahead and connect, and then you're going to want to connect to your application. We're going to copy this string here, and we are going back to VS Code, and then in a .env, let's go ahead and create a variable for that URI. Let's call it Mongo URI is equal to, we're going to pass the string here. And then in here, we're going to create, when you create a user, it's going to have you create a user, a secured user, so that you can access the database. You're going to want to actually, you're going to create a username and a password, and after you paste the link, you'll just want to delete the, you'll just want to delete where it says password, and you'll just want to pass your own password through. Okay, so I'm going to click out of this. Okay, and so here, in order to connect to our database, we're going to be using Mongoose. And Mongoose is going to be our ORM. to connect to our database. So we're going to say const mongoose is equal to require mongoose. Okay, and then let's go ahead and create our function. We're going to say const connect db is equal to, then we're going to create a sync function here. Sync, oops, sorry. So we're going to sync function here, and in here we're going to do a try catch. Okay, and in our try we're going to say const con. We're going to create a connection variable. So we're going to call it con. We're going to say await mongoose dot connect, and in here we are just going to pass. We're going to reference our env file. So we're going to process.env dot mongo URI. Okay, and if we are able to connect to MongoDB, we will console.log, and here we're going to pass backticks, and we're going to say MongoDB connected. And then here I'm going to pass con.connection.host, and then let's go ahead after the backtick. I'm sorry. Say dot cyan dot underline. Okay. Okay, and if for some reason we're not able to connect to our database, we will console.log error, and then we will process.exit 1. Okay, awesome. Okay, now all we have to do is export our connect DB variable here. And we're also going to want to set a strict query up here, otherwise it's going to give us an error. Mongoose.set, and here we're going to want to pass strict query. And then we're going to want to say true. And I think that we all get. And every time we make a change to our .env file, we need to npm run dev. There we go. And we're going to take a little water break here. Wow, that was beautiful. Okay, so let's go ahead and in order to execute this function that we've created to connect our application to our database to our application, we're going to want to bring it into our server file. So let's go ahead and go into our server file, and in here we're just going to want to bring that in. We're going to say const server const connect db is equal to require, and in here we're just going to reference that the path of where that file is, so config/db, and all we have to do here is just call the function. So we're going to say connect database, and we will just call our function connect db, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope we don't get an error. So down here, once I called it, I'm just going to say connect db, call the function, and let's go ahead and save that and see if we're able to connect. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So down here it says server started on port 6000, MongoDB connected, and then it's going to provide our link of where our database is. Awesome. So we completely have our server up and running on port 6000, and then we have MongoDB, our database, connected to our application. Okay, so now when we add items, add journal entries to the database, it'll actually be able to be stored there. Yes, yeah. And then when we update journal entries and delete them, it'll actually have a database to refer to when looking for those entries. All right. Well, thank you for watching the first video to this YouTube series. If you watched, and maybe if you even followed along, if you followed along, then at this point we have our server fully up and running, and we have MongoDB, our database, connected to our application. And in our next video, what we will be doing is we'll be creating the full functionality to our functions. So we will be completing all of our routes, and give them the ability to actually be able to execute the function. And maybe we can also even start creating a users model, which will allow us to create users, log in users, and then be able to get specific user data. And okay, yeah, thanks so much for watching. I think that's about 30 minutes. I'm pretty tired, so I'm kind of excited to go to sleep. Okay, thank you for watching. Until next time.